This is National Disability Awareness Month, and this was an arena that I didn't know much about when I was growing up. I mean, I would see people in wheelchairs, and of course you learn to greet them and talk and you know, engage in the way you would with anybody else, but it seems like people have some kind of apprehension of dealing and encountering people with different disabilities, and we're not taught that everybody has some ability. And when I was consulting, after I left broadcasting for a brief period of time, I was consulting in marketing and communications, and one of my clients was the Crippled Children's Society. And they later changed that organization's name to Ability First. And when we think about it, everybody has a gift and talent to contribute to the world. And we are all different, we're diverse, we come in many shapes, sizes, colors, all manner of personality and personal expression, but we're really all children of the same Creator. And we're coming more and more to understand the sense of oneness that exists, that we are one with an infinite Creator, whatever we call her. God has many names. Divine Providence, Charlie, it doesn't matter, but it's all one creation, and we are all brothers and sisters under the skin. And it's a delight to be able to have this kind of awareness now, where we're teaching young children, you know, that there are differences. There are children who can't hear, and maybe you have to do sign language. People, you know, who are wheelchair bound, people who have physical or emotional or mental challenges that they're dealing with. And I would say that blindness probably is one of the most spooky thoughts that people think about. You know, they're terrified of blindness for some reason. And people have said to me, oh my gosh, no, I'd rather be deaf than blind. I go, no, you don't understand. The gift of blindness is that I see black. I don't see anything, shape, shadow, nothing. I see black. And in that, I respond to people now differently because I hear tone of voice, I hear touch, I have the sense of, you know, the handshake or the hug, and the tone of voice for me is very important, and in providing me a sense of comfort and trust, and it's just very interesting. And people think about how difficult it must be to be blind, and certainly it's a challenge. Believe me, it's no picnic, but it's not the worst thing in the world. And the thing that I've discovered in this experience is that it has forced me, instead of being so drawn by the visual world, which is everything in our society, we over-teach to the visual rather than taking it into consideration for children who have different learning modalities and abilities. Audio learning, kinesthetic learning, and so it's just not all visual. And we're learning now, we have to balance out those different forms of teaching and of learning abilities that people have. And I think one of the reasons we have such large dropout numbers is because we tend to teach in one way, and that's to the visual learner. And many people have other ways and forms of learning. So we're broadening all this out, and it's very exciting to be able to bridge these kind of gulfs that exist between people that are considered able and people that are considered disabled. And I like the idea of abilities first, because we all have a gift or an ability, and I believe that we all are here to find out what our abilities are, to discover our gifts, to develop them, and to give them back to the world in order to make the world a better place for everyone. And I see these movements going on, and it's very exciting and very beautiful to experience them. So I'm thrilled to be a part of the celebration of Disability Awareness Month. The title of my book is Journey Through the Dark, and we're shortening it just to include the Journey Through the Dark title. But the idea of moving through the dark, which this experience has been literally and figuratively, because obviously there have been many challenging events that took place in the whole scenario of losing sight. I did not know I was really ill And I had some symptoms, and I had gone to doctors every month, and I was being given different antibiotics and prednisone to deal with sinus and ear infections and things like that. Nothing went away, and I had testing for other things, and nothing showed up. And I had no idea that I was really ill as I was. And I was apparently at the point of near death. The illness that they ultimately diagnosed was an autoimmune illness that had gone undetected. And they were not able to diagnose it easily. And I was, had it not been caught in time, and I was this close, apparently. A friend heard the doctors say it's a good thing we ultimately found a diagnosis. It took 5 weeks in and out of the hospital, and then another 2 weeks in between, because I had a gap time, between one visit and the other for different biopsies. But my girlfriend overheard the doctor saying it's a good thing we were able to diagnose and begin treatment. She would have been dead in another few days. So it was that kind of a situation. And many other things went on at the same time. Literally, the rug was pulled out from under me, and I went through a divorce. I had stopped working for the governor of New Mexico. I was directing marketing for the Cultural Affairs program, loved my work, traveled all over the state, and really got to integrate well into New Mexico. I lived there for 10 years and worked for the governor for 5.5. And he was leaving office, so we all had to leave with him and or jump ship and go over to another department. And I was going to take a little gap and, and then slide back in and do something else in one of the other divisions and departments when I got sick. And sight went in one eye, and then 3.5 weeks later, the sight went in the second eye. And what was so interesting about that experience was that that occurred over a 3-day period. So that first it was like looking through a mesh burqa. I don't know what that looks like, but we were talking a lot about it at that time after 9/11. And it was like looking through a webbing of some kind, some small grid. And then the next day it went darker. And I'm observing all this with the observer journalist's eye, which of course I'm trained that way. And I saw this going on, and then the third day I'm blind and I can't see. And it was, everybody asked, they say, weren't you terrified? Weren't you frightened by all of this? And I guess I was so sick, and I was so just observing this process and kind of going through whatever shifts had to happen. I think that 3-day event, it's kind of like the crucifixion to the 3-day to the resurrection, from the tomb that we hear about in Christianity. I think they're all cycles. I think there's cycles of living, there's cycles of dying, there's cycles of being reborn. And so I think that 3-day period gave me that bridge to appreciate that I could still see, because with one eye I could see, but believe me, I'd be very happy to have one eye. I could see my son go to the Cristo Mountains. I could see the foliage out on the trees that were surrounding the ranch land that I was living in northern New Mexico. And I could appreciate the beauty of my garden, and I could, see my children's faces, and I could experience all this, for the last time, temporarily, I hoped. And it was an interesting transition. And the beauty of what has happened since then is I had a friend she became a friend, who was staying at the ranch and who became kind of my aide, helper. I called her my life coach, because she encouraged me. She realized, what I had done, and I was very high-powered, and I'd done all these, amazing things in my life. I've had a rather remarkable life. And she said to me, she says, you're going to be the same person that you were sighted. She said, you're not going to be a blind woman. You're going to be a woman who happened to have lost her sight. And I thought that was a very interesting, approach. And I had a neighbor who would come over every morning at 6:30 in the morning, and we'd work out together. We'd do our yoga stretching and our beach bodies, and not water, but standing aerobics and aerobics on the ground. And we would do that every morning for 1 hour. And then she'd go home and shower and go into the office in Santa Fe, and I would shower and get dressed and be at my kitchen table, which was my command central, where I would, make phone calls and do training, because I was serving on the board of directors at that time of the La Plaza de Cultura y Arte Cultural Center in downtown Los Angeles. Gloria Molina was the chair of that board and the founding board member, and I was one of her 5 board members that helped create that new cultural center. So my commitment was to, continue to work with that board and to continue to function as if I had an 8-to-5 job, at that or more. And so I would work at my command central and I'd be making phone calls, but how did I make the phone calls? I couldn't see the dial and, all these things. And so I got help with some of those things, and I ultimately got an LG talking phone, one of those little flip phones, and that helped me. That was recommended by the Commission for the Blind in New Mexico. And they started sending people to the house to give me, start retraining me on computer, to learn audio software programs, and they gave me a reader to help me begin writing this book. And so I was gifted with a lot of support, and ultimately they sent me to the Colorado Center for the Blind in Littleton, Colorado. And I received independence training there, but I didn't realize it, but it was boot camp for the blind, and it was brutal, brutal. But the good news is I learned how to move and travel and work with a cane, and I regained my computer skills there, and they have you do home economics. That wasn't hard for me because I cook, and I still cook, and I chop, and I entertain, and do all of that. But it was brutal, and it was really geared to teens and 20s who were blind from birth, and many of these students were just so gifted. They played the piano, they were actors, they did martial arts, they were swimming champions and competitors. They had so many wonderful skills. They were really a very talented bunch of people, and they were there to be given responsibility and learn how to live independently away from their parents. So I'm a grown-up with all my skills and my abilities, and all of a sudden I'm being treated like I'm a teenager, and that wasn't fun. It really wasn't fun, and it was very hard to go through all of that. And I had one teacher who was the mobility teacher, who was like 27, and she was like a little drill sergeant. You all expected her to click her heels, and she would always stand at the edge of the there was a big island in the lounge of the lobby of the Littleton Center, and she'd kind of hang right at the corner where I had to make my turn to go either to the offices or go to the cafeteria or go to the restroom or wherever I had to go, and she'd be hanging right on this corner. So I'd go up to her and I go, I'd touch her because I'm a feeler, and I feel my way. I'd feel around a corner, I notice that this curtain is right here. And so I'd touch her. She said, "Don't you go be touching on me." I said, "Sweetheart, you're not my type." We would have so much fun like that. And so I had to make light of it, and I had to, we weren't supposed to ask for help, and we weren't supposed to take anybody's arm. I've learned to lead a guide from the Braille Institute in Santa Barbara, where they're much more humane and less boot campish and much more, believe me. And so that boot camp approach, which might have been good for teenagers, and 20-year-olds who need to learn independence, it might work for them, but I was an accomplished woman, and I realized that for me, the growth was to be able to ask for help and to be able to receive it. And so that, for me, has been a big part of the growth. And now I love it because I take somebody's arm, and I always treat everybody as in a doctor's office, a stranger in the street who helps me, any gentleman or woman who comes up to, offer me a hand. You don't want to be spinned around because that throws you off your center. You need to know where you are and keep your reference points. But I always teach them, I hold your arm. You don't want to grab me by the hand or the wrist. I want to take your arm and then put me behind you if I want to want me to walk behind, so I don't walk into a wall or a trip or something. And I say that way I'll be very obedient, And so for me, I joke about it that obedience has been one of the learning part of the learning curve in this experience. The other obedience is in this idea of journey through the dark. We're going through a very difficult, very painful process now in the growth of our country. And it is experiencing its own journey through the dark. There's a friend of mine in the audience, Grace, who I went to Brazil with. That's another story. But when we're talking about, we're seeing the dark side of, an individual. And she said, we're seeing the dark side of our nation, our personality as a nation, all of us. Hume talked about, the multiple sides of persona, anima, animus. And so we are, I think, as a country, experiencing this journey through our dark side. It's been around. We have a very painful and violent history in this country. We didn't learn about it in school, but we continue to learn more and more every year, every day, because different colonial powers came to this country, and there were battles and people were killed. The original inhabitants of this continent were basically slaughtered, and that has been a pattern throughout our history. So we have this darkness in the journey of our country. But the founding principles upon which we are based are very high-minded. They're, talk about divine providence and the city on the hill and the idea of freedom, justice, and equality for all. These are beautiful principles. And these are very high-minded spiritual principles that we are to grow into and to continue to abide by and uphold. And we are going through this period, but it is also a period of awakening. And so when I thought this morning, I actually shifted everything in what I was going to say today, based on just the shift I had in my own thinking this morning. And I thought, my personal journey is not unlike perhaps what we're seeing in what's going on nationally and now internationally, because of different ways of thinking in this country, and things that we thought we had given up. We fought a civil war. Things that we, during different periods of time, thought we had overcome and perhaps conquered, and we haven't. And there still is hatred and racism. I just recently saw a video that I did for C-SPAN when I was a journalist, and in 2000, when my book came out, I was asked to moderate the C-SPAN panel on the border. And I had 3 authors that were approaching border issues from 3 different perspectives. And I was moderating and integrating a lot of my own thought and work with Frijoles into that presentation. And I urge you to look at it. It's on my website. It's called The Border, and it's a C-SPAN show that I did, moderated. And the issues that I talked about then and that we all talked about as the members of that panel are exactly what we're dealing with today. And this is one of the reasons why I wrote the book then, that we have these virtues that we bring into the country. This is also National Hispanic Heritage Month, that we bring into this country with basically the shirt on the back, and people work up into wonderful positions, teachers, doctors, thinkers. We have a presidential candidate, Julian Castro, who's running for president. Bill Richardson ran, when Obama and Hillary were running. He was the 3rd candidate running at that time. And so everything that I talked about in 2000 still holds today in terms of the momentum and the positivism of this very vibrant Latino, Hispanic, immigrant, 3, 4, 5, 10 generations, people that have been here, population. And so I would urge you to take a look at that video clip. What I thought I would do is talk about how I have moved through the different stages of the blindness, and how I have been able to not only survive near fatal illness and get along with being blind, but to be able to thrive in this experience that I'm having. I live the life probably of 3 people. I travel to Mexico City alone a year ago, May, and I stayed, nobody could go with me. None of my friends could go with me. I even offered to take my daughter with me. No, Mom, I can't go. I don't want you spending your money. I just can't pick up and go like that. Well, why not, I mean, good God, daughter, just, I'm taking you to Mexico and you'll meet family and it'll be wonderful, just a few days. I was going to just take her for part of it. But so I go alone. And I had a fabulous time, and I saw my cousins in Mexico City, and they're the elderly cousins, my mother's first cousins, 91, 93, and 95, and just amazing people going strong, and I have good genes, and I'm very excited about that because that speaks well for longevity. But so I traveled, and then I went down to Oaxaca and stayed with a new friend I met in 2014 when I was coordinating a Salt of the Earth celebration of the making of that classic film, which was blacklisted, and all the people involved in it, including Rosario Revueltas, the lead actress of the film, were blacklisted during the McCarthy era. So these cycles just keep going around and around and around. But I think the transition points and the things that I have had to deal with in my own personal journey through the dark are things that will apply to how we get through any kind of traumatic, cataclysmic, life-changing event. And certainly we're seeing this in our body politic at the national level in the United States of America at this point in time. I think initially the gift that I had going in was that 3-day window, that Friday to Sunday kind of event, that transition point that allowed me to see that something different was happening very slowly. And then it was there. And I go, oh, I'm blind, you know. And I began to ask questions. Well, what do I do with this? How do I do this? What am I being called? What am I being called to do? What is mine to do now in this experience? And when I went into the hospital, I was blessed by having a really wonderful medical team. And I was totally open to whatever was going to happen in that experience. And I also drew upon my spiritual tools. I've always had a very deep and abiding faith in God. And I've always acknowledged that. And very early on, when I was doing growth development work, I did a program with called Intensive Journal Workshop with Ira Progoff, who was a student of Carl Jung, and had that Jungian perspective of the underground stream, which connects all of us. And life is really lived in this underground stream. It can be an overground stream, it's an all around us stream really, but it's termed in Jungian thought as the underground stream. And we draw from this, and we're all one, and we're all part of this stream of life. And what one person does to shed light on something opens it up for the whole universe. That's the belief in Jungian psychology as opposed to Freudian. And so that dialogue work really helped open me to the fact that my life was and is a spiritual journey. So I already was attuned to that. That was back in my 30s when I was doing those kind of studies. And I also was doing courses at the Founders Church of Religious Science. And I did the first and the second year course there with Bill Hornaday, who was a student of Ernest Holmes, who wrote the textbook Science of the Mind. And Bill Hornaday was a wonderful metaphysician, and just his tone of voice was healing. And my son, when he had a bicycle accident when he was 9 years old, 10 years old, and fractured his skull, I called Reverend Bill, and I told him that we had just found out that Joaquin had a skull fracture and had to go through brain surgery, cranial surgery. And Reverend Bill just said, now we know that Joaquin is just perfect and that God is, God is at work in this situation. And there are no accidents. And I just heard those words, and I was, of course, taking classes with him at that time. It was very close to me because Joaquin was a young boy, and I'd been taking classes during that period of time when I took 2 years off with each child for my broadcast career, and then went back into my broadcast career. But I wanted to be with my babies. My husband was a politician. We couldn't, we had a very chaotic political life, a lot of action. We were both away from the kids, periods of time. And so I would drag my son everywhere I went for the first few years. And then when I had Danielle, I would take her with me as much as I could, but she had an older brother, and now we had childcare and the grandparents and so on and so forth. And so I could, leave her with the grandparents, and we could go off and do all of our politicking. But the beauty of that period of time, when I took time off to do things on my terms, not just to work, not to turn the baby over to somebody at 6 weeks and give all that experience up of creating the foundation for my babies. I took classes and I did a lot of spiritual growth work during that period of time. So it was a fascinating period because I'm serving on boards of directors, I'm married to an elected official, I've got these babies, I'm nursing. I was on the California Highway Patrol Women Traffic Officer Project Advisory Committee to explore the feasibility of employing women in the CHP and in law enforcement, later in fire, and all these other careers that were non-traditional for women. I was pregnant when I started that program. Then I'm nursing my son at the board table at the thing with these guys. It said, "Over my dead body will women ever be in the CHP?" And it was to Governor Brown's credit that he had a really diverse stakeholder group. We had men, no way in heck did they want anybody to be on the CHP, a female. The commissioner said, "Over my dead body will anybody serve?" And Governor Brown fired him and got somebody who was at least open to the feasibility of employing women. But we had women that didn't want women. And then there were those of us who were open to the feasibility of employing women in whatever careers women choose to serve, where they can pass the criteria to perform at a level that is job-related, not 5'6", 160 pounds, and a penis. I mean, that is not a job-related criteria, is it? Really? So that was a really incredible experience, but I'm saying this because, I was doing all of these diverse things, and yet I was doing this spiritual work and spiritual groundwork, building upon, what I had been raised and had been taught in Sunday school and by my mother. And it's all in my book, it's all in the Freeholders. If you read chapter 5, the faith chapter, it lays down my faith tradition, my sense of faith, and the deep faith that exists within the Hispanic and Latino culture. So the first thing that I experienced in going into the hospital was this sense of spiritual tools that I had available to me. And these are available to all of us. We have tools for having a correct and right democracy, our Bill of Rights and our Constitution, our rule of law. These are our tools, and we need to work our tools to fulfill the dreams that were set forth by our founding fathers and mothers. And the same thing I had to do when I was in the hospital. And I was dealing with fear and with pain. And fear is one of the factors that we're dealing with very much in these times, because it is so horrific, all that is going on, it engenders fear. And when you have fear, you're immobilized, you cannot act. You're frozen. People didn't vote in the last election. They will vote in this coming one, because I think they're realizing that every single vote counts. And but I was feeling fear and pain. So again, my steps are a metaphor for what we're going through in our national journey that we're experiencing right now. And so I knew I had to use my spiritual tools, and somehow I was guided that when I had those lonely, fearful nights in the hospital, my family, my friends, the doctors, the nurses, everybody who was coming and going all day long were gone. I'm in the dark, the room is in the dark, I feel the dark, and I was, I had pain and I had fear some nights. And somehow I was guided to recite declarations that I learned in Sunday school and from my mother. And I started reciting those to myself out loud. And I would sing to myself a poem written by Mary Baker Eddy that was also a hymn that we sang in Sunday school and in church. And I used to play the organ in Sunday school until, when I was in high school. And so I was very familiar with that song. And my mother would sing me that song when I wasn't feeling well as a child. And so there I am in this hospital bed, and I'm singing these words. And the words are very beautiful. Oh, gentle presence, peace and joy and power. Oh, life divine that awaits each, special hour. And then it talks about, guide my children, on upward wing tonight. It's a protective poem, a protective hymn for mother and for child. And the real words that really struck me at that time is, "Oh, make me glad for every scalding tear, for hope deferred, ingratitude, disdain, to seek and love more for every hate and fear. No ill, since God is good and loss is gain." I sang that to myself over and over and over again. And I never understood what the words of the declarations that I used to learn in Sunday school meant. I never really got that idea of, loss is gain. Who says loss is gain? But I understand it now in this transition of blindness, because what was lost in one sense has been multiplied in the gifts of awareness and spiritual clarity and discernment that has been so much a part of this experience, thanks to my upbringing, thanks to the learning and the study that I did in my 30s and beyond that, where I've always been aware of being on this spiritual journey. And how do I grow more? How do I arrive at that place of highest purpose, and to be able to declare that and act on it? And that has been a tremendous part of this amazing process, this journey, which, yes, was scary, frightening, challenging. Colorado broke me wide open emotionally. I've never cried so much in my life. It was just traumatic and very difficult, and very lonely and isolating, because I was the only grown-up in the program, and I had a bipolar 24-year-old roommate on meds who hated her mother. So it was like not a fun program. But I loved her, and I tried to give her as much as I could, because I'm naturally motherly. I used to counsel high school dropouts, and so I'm trying to coach this woman and, get her through her ups and downs and encourage her to use her gifts and talents, because she had a beautiful singing voice like an angel. And but it broke me open, and maybe I wouldn't have broken open and gotten to the place where I found myself, had I not been able to just emotionally crumble and then bring it back together again through the spiritual principles that I've studied all my life. So the idea of using those spiritual tools, of recognizing our inherent wholeness, we are created reverently and wondrously. And what would it be like if we recognized that in ourselves? I remember years ago I gave a talk at Glendale Community College. It was during Women's History Month, I believe. And I had run across a biblical passage, "We are fearfully and wonderfully made." And I thought, well, that's a nice idea, but I don't believe we're made in fear. I don't believe we're supposed to fear God. We're supposed to revere God. And that means, and my hunch was, my gut feeling was, the word really in Aramaic was revere. We are reverently and wondrously made. How would we act if we really believed that? And we are. We are. And all these things that I learned, I started piecing them together, and virtues really was a part of that process too, and that was back in 2000, because the virtues are the building blocks of character. And if we exercise virtue, responsibility, respect, hard work, loyalty, and faith, honesty, fortitude, all the way to charity and chastity, it's an exercise in character building. And so those principles are very important to us. This idea of virtue, this idea of developing our qualities of spirit, the virtues, these are all things and gifts that we have able to draw from and draw from and inculcate in ourselves. And so this experiment that I've had of moving through the blindness has been that. It's been relearning, it's been retraining, it's been learning how to cross a busy highway with an audio signal only, how to walk down a meandering path by myself as an independence exercise, how to go over across the bridge and go over past the veterinarians, go across the driveway and get up onto the bond sidewalk and do my errands over there by myself. I get help. You know, if I get disoriented, I stand still for 30 seconds and somebody says, can I help you? And I go, yes, yes, help, please. But and I've even called out and said, anybody here, you know, help, I don't know where I am. And immediately somebody sees me, and people, I guess, are watching, you know, out for me all the time. I have many, many angels. And so that's the other thing, that there are all these, there's a protective mantle that I carry with me, and I don't have fear. I plunge out into the world without fear. And isn't that a gift? Because a lot of people want to live behind bars, you know, in their residences, and I do live in a gated neighborhood, but I walk across the highway, go across half a mile away all by myself. And I travel and I take buses and trains, and people talk to me and help me, and you know, I've got buddies at the train stops. The red caps know me. In fact, one guy, this morning I came in on the 7 o'clock from the desert this morning, and one of the guys at the Fullerton train station, John, is a new guy. I said, are you new? He says, no, I've been here for 20 years. I said, well, I've never had you help me before. He says, yeah, all the other guys go after you first. I never get a chance to help you. I've been hearing about you all these years, and I want to help you. Let me help you today. And so it was really sweet, because we had a wonderful conversation. And he had a beautiful, beautiful spirit. And I said, where are you from? He said, well, I'm from the United States. He says, but I grew up my dad was in the military, and I grew up in Spain and Germany and all these different countries. And I could tell, because he just had this largeness about him, this exposure to multiple worlds and multiple cultures, which is what we have the opportunity to have in our country, which is so diverse, especially here in California and Los Angeles. And we need to learn from each other. We need to love each other and appreciate each other and draw from each other's cultural beliefs and practices and foods. And you know, we all love the food, but what do they think? How do they live? How do they express joy? How do they express respect for their elders and all these wonderful traditions and cultures that people across the globe have? And so this sense of raising ourselves up from the inside out has been a part of my process, a very conscious process of being more loving, being more compassionate, being more giving, being more active of what is that is mine to do. And when I was very early on, and I had just come back from the independence training program, I was staying with a girlfriend in Santa Barbara, one of my college friends, and Sissy. And she had gone off one morning to exercise class or something. I run an errand, I can't remember. But I was at home alone with my spiral notebook at her home. And I was writing longhand. I started writing this book longhand. And then I had a volunteer who read that back to me. She corrected I said, change that, change that. She put it in red on the notebooks. And then she came back through and we read those 10 notebooks, you know, word by word, and I typed in every word into the computer myself so I could make changes as I went, and then I organized material into different chapters. So that was a long process and a learning curve. But it was that taking the steps, breaking it all down, like the frijoles, you know, sorting and washing the beans, and taking such attention to the smallest details of everyday life, and that was a lesson of the frijoles. When my mother said, you know, I asked her, what's made you so strong? And she said, beans. Beans have made me strong. And I didn't get it. I didn't understand it until 8 months later when I'm washing and sorting the beans. I go, that's it. That attention to detail, that sorting the good from the bad, the real from the false, the truth from the lie. And that's life. That's what we have to do every day. And so that's what I seek to do every day. And what is really important today, and what is mine to do today. And at that visit with Sissy, I was writing in my journal that I learned during the intensive journal workshops back in my 30s. And it's a dialogue process of I and thou. And you have a dialogue with person, place, event, society, or body. And they're very revealing. You're really dialoguing with your higher self. And it's an I-thou process. You can dialogue with persons living or dead. The dialogue with body is extraordinary. It is so funny, it's so painful, it's so real. If you pay attention to what your body's telling you, boy, does it give you a lot of information. But you know what? We often don't pay attention. And I didn't in the early symptoms of the blindness. I was feeling off my personal mission. I was feeling spiritually disconnected because I wasn't doing anything about my spirituality at that time. I was just working for the governor and doing his work, not my own work, my spiritual work and my writing work. And so I wasn't paying attention to what my body dialogue told me, you know, the fall before I started getting sick. But this sorting that we have to do in everyday life. And there's something called divine discontent. And when we feel restless, and when we feel like things are off and things aren't quite right, you know, what's going on? And we don't know. And some people go to drink or drugs or sex or gambling or whatever it is, you know, some kind of addiction. But the divine discontent is really our higher self's way of saying, hey, you're off the mark. You know, it's not a sin, it's just being off the mark. It's an arrow archery term. And it's what needs to be changed here. And out of that dialogue, I learned that my role and my purpose and my work to do was to write. You know, it is a gift I have. I've been a journalist most of my life. And the image of my dialogue, I saw there was a path, and the path was straight ahead. And I wasn't to go to the left, I wasn't to go to the right, I was to go straight down this path, and write and do this book and do that form of work and creative work. So I got that message very clearly, and I knew I had to write for my life. If I wanted to live, if I wanted to sustain in a healthy way, I had to be on purpose, and that was my purpose, was to get a book out that was going to help a lot of people. So that part of the process, to discern, to use one's tools, our rule of law is a tool, our spiritual tools are tools, and we all have different practices that we can employ. The ancients and the moderns are now coming together in physics. Vedanta taught, you know, universality of life, of our oneness with Atman. Call it God, call it Yahweh, call it Allah, call it Charlie, again, many words, but this idea of oneness and unity, that we are each other, we breathe in each other's air as it goes around the globe, we are one, we are each other. And what harms one harms us, me, you. So all of these different forms of discernment have been very important shifts in this process. I write about the process. I write, you know, elaborately about many things. And knowing that my life has been a spiritual journey, and all of us are spiritual beings having a human experience. We're more than flesh, blood, and bones. Surely most of us have come to some kind of awareness of that fact. And all aspects of self have to be integrated. All aspects of self have to be respected and given their due. One of the first things I learned, and I learned it the hard way, as I've learned most things the hard way, when I was first blind, the hardwood floors in the bedroom at the ranch were wooden, and they were slick. And I'm walking on stocking feet, or I had booties or something on, and I slipped backwards, and I hit my head conk hard on the mesquite headboard of the bed. And I go, ouch, I didn't need that. And I look up at towards the ceiling, what was that all about? And I got a very clear answer. I got these words that went flying through my head: blockhead, knucklehead, hardhead. I go, okay, what's the message here? I spoke out loud, I said, okay, what's the message? And I got the very clear message: you need a daily spiritual practice. And so paying attention is important. We have many synchronous events. My hitting my head, and I've hit my head many times over the last 10 years, running into corners or walls, or, you know, and I always say, okay, now what, now what, now what? And because, you know, it is a hard head. I have been a stubborn person. I have a strong will. And that has to be bent and shaped and honed and developed in, you know, new ways, especially now. But I got the message early on, and I began to do a spiritual practice, a meditation practice, which I had done in graduate school. I did transcendental meditation with a Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, nonetheless. And he's the one that they had the Harvard studies with that transcendental meditation was documented to be a stress release response. It lowered blood pressure. It had many positive biological effects on the body. And Herbert Benson, who did those studies at Harvard, I spoke with him just last fall, and he said, yeah, we called it the relaxation response. He wasn't going to call it spirituality, because that's a little too woo-woo for cardiologists, but it was a new way of looking at the mind-body-spirit connection. And we discovered at that time, and I was consulting in Boston at that time and exposed to Benson there, that there is a mind-body-spirit connection. And what we think is what we get. And so that was another factor in the spiritual toolkit, was how am I thinking? Am I thinking loving thoughts? Am I thinking positive thoughts? Or am I, being annoyed or jealous or resistant or angry or, any other manner of negative thought? And thoughts are things. And we get what we pay attention to. All the training that I've had in spirituality and in different thought systems is that we get what we pay attention to. So when we're being negative and hateful and we're, railing at the television set, and there's a reason to rail, but, that doesn't help anything. It doesn't help us and it doesn't help the situation. We have to reverse that and bring in that which we want, which is why I say my affirmative prayer for our country at this time is to bring in the rule of law, to know that our judicial systems are standing upright, that our court system is functioning, that our Bill of Rights is being honored. We're growing into our Bill of Rights. We're growing into the fulfillment of our Constitution fully, that equality, liberty, and justice for all. And this is key stuff. And so it transposes from the transition through a very traumatic, life-changing experience, which was the loss of sight. It transposes into how we have to operate and deal with our national picture as well. And so that's one of the reasons the book is not about blindness. Blindness was the vehicle for my learning to see in a new way. And one of the premises in the book is that when I was sighted, I was blind to many things. And in the blindness, I am more spiritually discerning and I see more clearly. It's an amazing statement to make, but it is true. And the ability to walk out of that hospital, I was wheelchaired out, you have to legally, but I walked out of that hospital alive and well. I was completely off of medication within 15 months. They started phasing me off after 12. And by 15 months off of it, I haven't a bit of disease in my body. I'm perfectly healthy. I'm strong. I'm thriving. I'm living the life of 3 people. And I'm productive and creative. It's very exciting to know that love opens up more creativity, buoyancy, joy, peace, reflection, meditation. All of these things that I've been doing over the years have just continued to buoy me and to allow me to have more creativity and a different kind of creativity. And so there have been many blessings in all of this. And one of them has been the blessing of courage. It takes courage to live. And my rehabilitation coach, counselor in New Mexico, with the New Mexico Commission for the Blind, when I went through a divorce and I moved into town, I'm living by myself in a remote kind of, place. Beautiful place, but it was a little too remote, and I ended up moving because it was too remote. I didn't realize that I couldn't walk the streets in that neighborhood because there were too many ruts and stuff in Santa Fe. But she came to my house and she said, "My God, you're brave." I didn't understand it then, but a number of people have said that to me, and I go, well, I guess I am, but it takes courage to live. It takes courage to face up to a catastrophic life change. And a lot of people go under with it. They go into drugs, or they become homeless, they live on the streets, terrible things happen. They commit suicide, they get depressed. But that hasn't been my path, because I think the courage, which is a God-given gift, and it's drawn from the spiritual tools and from the meditation and from the practice, and resetting attention, paying attention and resetting intention, and to intend to be a certain way, to live fully, to be creative, to be productive, to fulfill highest purpose, to have the experiences that I want to have, to experience unconditional love. All these things, these intentions, are actively being fulfilled or have been fulfilled. And so I would say that courage is something that we need also on the national level. And what do each of us, what can we look at in our own lives? What is our own kind of divine discontent that is driving us? What do I have to do? What can I do? Oh, I'm powerless to do anything. No, you're not. None of us are powerless. One person, one vote, one act of kindness, one step in a direction of love and kindness and appreciation works miracles. And the light that we shed in one place spreads out to many people and across the globe. For any of you who saw the film A Year of Living Dangerously, it took place during the Indonesian Revolution, and it was horrific. The poverty, the war, the violence, everything that was going on. And remember the character actor, the photographer in the movie was given an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. And it was, I'll never forget the words in the film, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? What can we do? How do we help this horrific situation, bloodshed everywhere? We can learn to love those who cross our path. That's a very powerful idea. And that's what we need today. We have to give love, we have to share love, we have to express love, we have to bring in love and know that the powerful, positive, beautiful gifts in ourselves, gifts of spirit, of creativity, of intelligence, of wisdom, of joy, of peace, of serenity, of creativity, of everything, are things that we can draw upon and grow and develop little by little, every day, one step at a time. Krishnamurti talks about three things. Is it possible? Is it not possible? Might it be possible? And if we can live in that place of possibility, and quantum physics is telling us there, because everything is possible. Everything is microscopic and tiny, and you can't feel it or touch it. And they say now even the observer shapes what we experience. And as a journalist, I knew that. If I went in rolling with a camera, and it changed the event. Now they stand up there with placards, they do everything, rah, 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 cheer, 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 they know what to do in front of a camera. And so it becomes a different event just because that camera eye, the observer's eye, the journalist's eye is there. But we each change our world environment by what we're seeing, what we're thinking, and what we're doing, how we're behaving, how we're responding. And so when we respond with that love and that peace and that serenity that's ours, we're going to change the world. Because one little ray of light expands, expands, expands. And that's why it's so important to be part of that life, love, light-giving experience. And so that's been this process, that's been this journey. It's been an incredible time, and I think one other thought, apart from the ones I've mentioned, the paying attention and intention and setting, opening possibilities, and is this idea that necessity creates capacity. When we're forced to do something, you know what? You either buckle down and fall down, or you buckle up and you do it. And I think each of us have that ability to do more than we're doing. We all tend to be lazy. I'm lazy. There are days I don't want to do anything. There are days when I'm not using myself fully. And I don't enjoy those days as much. I really like it when I'm on purpose and I've got to get something done and I'm charging forward, I'm doing something. But there are also times when you have to, okay, that's a chill day. Today let's look at things differently. But this idea that necessity creates capacity has been so real for me, because being forced to look within, to say, how am I going to do this? Why the blindness? To what am I blind? I asked that when I was up at Sissy's house way, way back when. And she started to cry. And she says, you're asking, to what am I blind? You don't feel pity for yourself? No, I don't. Why is this experience coming to me? What am I to gain from it? What am I to give back from it? What am I to learn from it? What am I to share from it? I mean, I've always done that in my life. And she started crying because there's not been a day of pity party. I learned not to do that from my self-mastery teacher when I was also in my 30s. I took a course on self-mastery. But we have to live with what we got. We have to live in the now, in the present, today. It may be our only day. We may not be here tomorrow. Every day is a gift. The sun also rises, yes, and we look forward to that. But, things change. I never expected to wake up blind one morning. But it has been because I've asked those questions. What am I to do with this? What is mine to do? What is my highest purpose? How do I continue to live into that? And that's a question that all of us can ask ourselves, because at no time, like now, do we each need to ramp up our ante and to really draw from our best and highest selves to make sure things shift and change, and that our rule of law, our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, the principles that guide this country are upheld and lived into fully, so that we have a totally different world. And we're looking now at a global picture. We have to look at climate change. We have to look at peace on earth. We have to look at all of these different things. And each of us has a role in all of this some way or other. Let's think on all the blessings that we have each day and be grateful for everything. Be grateful for the air conditioning we have in here. We're not sweltering. We're sheltered, and we're living, fully to our capacities, because it is a gift. I was very this close to not being here. Life is a gift, and it is a blessing to be alive, and it is a blessing to be here with you this evening. And I thank you for being here and for allowing me to share my story with you.